It began with a strip of grass barely 2 feet wide, running between two suburban driveways. To most, it looked like nothing more than a patch of green, but to Nancy, it was a matter of pride. She swore it belonged to her property, manicured weekly and trimmed like a badge of ownership. Her neighbor Greg claimed otherwise, insisting his deed included the very same patch. What started as muttered complaints quickly grew into heated glares. Trash bins nudged across invisible boundaries and whispered stories to other neighbors. The stage was set for a battle that no one expected to escalate. Soon, brightly colored survey flags dotted the lawn like confetti after a parade. Greg had hired a land surveyor, waving the report as proof that the grass belonged to him. Nancy countered by calling in her own expert, whose findings oddly contradicted Greg's. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip, each side gathering quiet supporters. Small arguments turned into official complaints, and before long, the HOA found itself forced into awkward mediation sessions. Both refused compromise, each convinced they were right. What should have been settled with a handshake had now become a battleground marked in inches, not acres. Unable to find peace, Nancy escalated. She marched into court, filing a lawsuit against Greg for trespassing on her property. Greg retaliated with a countersuit, claiming damages for harassment and legal fees. Legal paperwork piled up faster than weeds in spring, and both sides drained money on attorneys eager to fuel the conflict. Neighbors shook their heads, stunned that a tiny strip of grass had triggered such chaos. Local whispers turned into news coverage, cameras circling the cul-de-sac. What had once been private suburban tension was now a public spectacle, and both parties were too far gone to turn back. The courtroom filled with tension as the case began. Nancy sat rigid, clutching folders stuffed with photographs, lawn care receipts, and highlighted copies of her deed. Greg leaned back confidently, flashing a smirk that only fueled her fury. Attorneys clashed, presenting dueling surveys, measurements, and boundary maps that contradicted one another by mere inches. The judge sighed, unimpressed with the theatrics, demanding concrete proof. Each revelation seemed to deepen the mystery of who truly owned the land. Both neighbors felt momentum swing back and forth like a pendulum, neither realizing that the biggest twist was yet to surface. Pressured by the court, both sides were ordered to produce original property deeds. What seemed like a formality became a turning point. Greg's attorney discovered inconsistencies in old subdivision records, hinting that the boundaries had been redrawn decades earlier. Nancy's documents, while neat, suddenly looked outdated. A deeper search into county archives revealed forgotten paperwork buried in bureaucratic files. The tiny strip of grass, once assumed to belong to one or the other, now seemed to float in legal limbo. Gasps spread across the gallery as the truth began to edge closer, threatening to unravel everything they believed. The county's original plat maps showed that the strip of grass had never belonged to either homeowner. Due to a clerical error from the 1970s, the land was actually public property, technically owned by the city. Neither Greg nor Nancy had any legal claim to it. The courtroom erupted with whispers and muffled laughter, the absurdity of months of fighting laid bare. Both neighbors sat stunned, realizing they had waged war over land that belonged to neither of them. The judge, stone-faced, prepared to deliver a ruling that would settle the madness. The judge's gavel echoed as order was restored. With calm precision, he declared that neither party owned the disputed strip. All claims were dismissed, and both neighbors were warned against future harassment. The city would reclaim responsibility for maintaining the grass, leaving Nancy and Greg powerless over their prized battleground. The years of animosity, expenses, and embarrassment suddenly seemed pointless. The neighbors left the courthouse in silence, their feud deflated but reputation scarred. What had once been about pride and control had dissolved into humiliation, leaving the entire neighborhood to quietly judge them both. Back on the cul-de-sac, the strip of grass grew unremarkable once more, now maintained by city workers who barely noticed its existence. But the feud had left deep scars. Nancy avoided Greg's gaze, while Greg stopped hosting his usual barbecues. Gossip lingered long after the legal dust settled. Clips of the trial spread online, turning their dispute into viral entertainment. Strangers mocked them in comment sections, dubbing it the grass war of the century. What began as a suburban quarrel ended as a cautionary tale, a reminder that sometimes the smallest battles carry the most humiliating defeats.